Welcome to the American Institute of Stress's official podcast, Finding Contentment. The goal of this podcast is to highlight new information about stress and stress management techniques. While we understand that stress is a very personalized issue and different for everyone, we hope to help you find your own way to contentment.
Hey, greetings, everyone. Welcome back to Finding Contentment. This is your host and executive director for the American Institute of Stress. It's Will Heckman. Thank you once again for joining us. Hopefully you've joined us in the past and you will for future podcasts. If you are joining us for the very first time, these podcasts focus on stress-related issues. Please remember to follow us on stress.org and become a member. And send in those reviews and comments. If you're watching us on YouTube, I'm going to tell you to do whatever YouTuber tells you to do. Hit the like button and subscribe. It's over there somewhere. I'm not sure where it is, but hit the subscribe button and leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you guys. Okay, so today we're talking about cooking as a stress reliever, specifically cooking with kids. Have been a parent and been involved in cooking for a very long time. Cooking is a great way to make sure that our families are getting the proper nutrition and the nourishment we need. But it's also, which would not be so obvious, is that cooking or baking, my favorite, can also be an effective way to relieve stress. It's an opportunity to be creative, stimulate your brain, and if we involve them, we can connect with our kids a little bit too. And also it is a life skill that many people, especially kids, don't have. When I taught high school, I would have kids who come to see me. They're about to go to college. And what are they afraid of? I don't know how to do anything. I don't know how to cook. I don't know how to clean. I said, you're 17 years old. You don't know how to cook? No, it's a learned skill. And also for many of us, we have to remember that food carries an emotional connection. It's a great way to celebrate special occasions and observe cultural practices, or even serve as a comfort when you're feeling sick. These days, it's a big topic. Because cooking engages our senses. It can activate memories. You know, the smell of a dish might remind you of your grandmother's house, or perhaps your favorite restaurant when you've been on vacation. And allowing yourself to be immersed in those memories as you cook is a very therapeutic way to relieve stress. And it can boost your mood and also your kids. Today, we're talking about somebody who knows a lot more about this than I do. We're going to be talking with Katie Kimball. And Katie Kimball is a national voice of healthy kids cooking. She's a blogger. She's also a 2-time TEDx speaker, a former teacher as I am, and a mom of 4 kids who founded the Kids Cook Real Food e-course. Now, that was recommended by the Wall Street Journal in 2020 as the best online cooking class for kids. Think about that. And her blog, Kitchen Stewardship, that's hard to say, Kitchen Stewardship, helps families stay healthy without going crazy, at least not from cooking. They can go crazy for other reasons. And she's on a mission, and she wants to connect families around healthy food, raise critical thinking skills, which it does, and using that lab of curiosity that the kitchen is, and to grow kids' meals revolution, where every kid, every child can learn to cook. Listen, I can't tell you all the things this woman does because it would take pretty much the whole show. So if you want to learn more about it, go to kidscookrealfood.com. I'm going to say that again because it's a great site. kidscookrealfood.com. And also make sure you visit kitchenstewardship.com. I think I said it better that time. kitchenstewardship.com. And she has a lot of books on Amazon you can find. She has her own YouTube channel. I have some favorites. I'll talk about that later. But please help me and welcome in Katie Kimball. Katie, thank you very much for joining us today.
Well, that was quite an introduction.
Yeah, I'm just reporting it. I didn't do that stuff. You did. You're a very busy person. I mean, And congratulations, the best online cooking class for kids by the Wall Street Journal. That's awesome.
That was a hugely fun surprise. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you, the first thing I wanted to talk about, because it's very interesting to me and I'm very curious, is I know you did a lot of things. And we talked a little bit about that. You were a teacher at one time. You've done a bunch of things. You're a blogger and you're a writer. How'd you get involved in cooking with kids? Sometimes when you cook with kids, they're annoying. So, I've done it with my daughter. And, although my daughter watched a few too many, was it Cake Boss shows? Oh my God. I mean, you come home and the entire kitchen is filled with cupcakes. But how did you get involved with cooking with kids?
It really was a place of desperation for me, to tell you the truth. I was a teacher. You're right. I taught third grade for a few years. And then as a perfectionist, I knew I couldn't teach full time and mom full time. So when our first child came along 16 years ago now, I knew I had to leave full-time teaching. Yeah. And, so I really immersed myself in the world of being a mom. And that was sort of my real food revolution, was just every bite this tiny body eats matters so much. And maybe hamburger helper and bottled dressing is not the way I should be, nourishing myself and this new little life. Right. So that was my food awakening, because I was just a pretty standard American eater before that. And I'd always had a love for the Montessori method of teaching, which is very immersed. It talks a lot about practical life skills in the little kids. And so my first son was really involved in the kitchen with me and cutting things up with dull knives when he was like 18 months old. But when baby number 2 came along, that got trickier. And I literally, the first time she ever climbed up on the chair to help, she was about 18 months. And my oldest son, Paul, was cutting up apples with a dull cheese knife. And it really felt like perfectly safe. He'd done it for years. I had another cheese knife that we'd just never used. I pull it out. I hand it over to my 18-month-old who just wants to be involved, right? And I thought, she can just explore this. No, she immediately cut herself. It was not as dull at all as I had assumed. And my stress level went through the roof. I thought, I can't do this. Like fight or flight, it was 100% flight for me. I thought, I can't do this with 2 kids. And in the amount that, they both were involved in the kitchen definitely decreased after that. And so by the time baby 4 came along, I was realizing I was spending a lot of time at the cutting board. I was working really hard to feed my kids healthy, real food. And I was starting to forget what they looked like because I was spending a lot of time at the cutting board. So for me, it was a little bit of a place of desperation, like 2 motivations, like, oh my gosh, I need help. And my oldest Paul at that time was 10. And I thought, okay, I have passed the halfway point in child rearing time. I've got 8 years left before he goes off to college. And as much as setting up this real food culture and teaching him to eat healthy is important to me, that's not going to last if he doesn't know how to do it for himself. Right? He will land in the ramen noodles and the frozen pizza, even though like he knows how to eat broccoli. If he doesn't know how to cut, if he doesn't know how to cut the things, he can't unlock the produce section. So for me, that was kind of why I decided to spend a summer really intentionally teaching my kids to cook. And at that point, gosh, I'd been blogging at Kitchen Stewardship for 5 or 6 years. So I built up quite a community, and I kept hearing a really similar complaint from my generation, right? Like you just told us that 17-year-olds, didn't know how to cook. Well, a lot of 20 somethings don't know how to cook because what people kept telling me was, gosh, Katie, I really want to get healthy. I really want to learn to cook healthy, but it's so hard because I don't know how to cook anything. My mom never taught me. So I feel like our generation was really skipped. Our parents were well-intentioned. They wanted our lives easier than theirs. Right. But sometimes easy.
Do you think it's generational?
Better.
Do you think it's generational?
I do think it's generational. I think that I'm 41. I think my parents' generation pretty much was taught to cook. That would be my generation. But then 2 things happened, right? Convenience food amped up. Right. So sometimes people just weren't cooking. Right. And then there was this sort of parenting shift, I think, where a lot of parents just thought, I really want my kids' lives to be easier. I don't want to make them do chores. They don't need this stuff. Right. But they made our adulthoods a little harder because then we're floundering about going, I don't even know how to feed myself. So I thought as a teacher and a mom, I could step into that gap so that the cycle doesn't repeat itself. And in 20 years, our kids are saying, oh, my mom never taught me to cook. I don't know how to eat vegetables, So that's why I just thought I can serve the community by using sort of my curriculum building skills as a teacher and create something and see what happens.
And it's so great that you did, because it's really not taught anywhere anymore. In the old days, you could take a home ec class, you could take a cooking class in high school. It was part of the curriculum. They don't do that anymore. And it's no one's fault. It's just not time for it. As a teacher, when we talked, a lot of times, I've had math teachers say, I spent the whole day today telling kids about a checkbook. We don't teach life skills, and cooking. What could, guys, not for nothing, you got to eat. You may never use a check ever again, but you got to eat. And a box of Twinkies is probably not the best lunch. So then you come along and you show, in a great way, an entertaining way, and a less stressful way, how you can teach your kids to cook. I've been cooking since I'm 12.
Awesome.
I don't do it as much anymore. I get complaints that I don't do it as much, but I don't do it as much anymore. My wife and daughter cook. And that love of cooking, that starts with people like you, teaching kids and teaching parents how to teach their kids and taking some of that stress out of it. Like you said, the first thing that happened, my kid cut herself. It's like, oh my God, this is a bad thing. But it's not. It really is a good thing. And I wanted to ask you something else, because we're talking about food. We're talking, it's something that, like you said, even when you're about to have kids, every bite you take is so important. But what do you think can happen if we don't start to change our eating habits? And the eating habits of our kids? Like you said, a lot of times we go to convenience food, and that's not always the healthiest choice. What happens if we don't start changing things like that?
Yeah, I'm reading a Mark Bittman's book called Animal Vegetable Junk, and he's detailing kind of the history of food and food marketing. And there's so many profound quotes, but one of the things he says is that, there's a ton of conflict about what's healthy and what's not. And it's really hard to show causation because the human experience is so diverse, right? It's really hard to say X nutrient has caused the increase in diseases of civilization in the last 40 years because so many things have happened. But he said it's pretty clear, and a lot of experts agree, that the rise of ultra processed foods has been devastating to the health of human beings, right? Ultra processed foods. And I think one of the reasons they are so devastating is because they're so easy. What do we want, especially when we're stressed, right? But our human response is to conserve energy, right? Some people would call it to be lazy, but we really are just conserving our energy when we choose cheap, easy, and quick. Cheap, easy, and quick. And that's ultra processed foods. And so when children are learning as a habit that this is how we nourish ourselves. And I don't even want to use the word nourish. This is how we feed our faces, right? And they're learning that cheap, easy, and quick is the way to go. And the ultra processed foods are exciting their taste buds and really sort of setting this bar of extreme flavor that real food can't quite compete with, right? Because it's laboratory defined for extreme flavor. And so what happens? Well, we're overfed and undernourished. We've got we have undernourished upper and middle class and upper class American kids who are eating tons of food, but they don't have enough nutrients, right? They're sick. And I think one of the things that I want parents to understand more is that we have to care about our kids' health. I think too many parents are really complacent. They say, my kid's not heavy. Life is fine. It's fine. It doesn't matter. And unfortunately, if you look at the statistics, we know, that diabetes has increased in kids. I think it's a factor of 3 times in the last 10 years. And that's not even a disease that should be happening in kids. Type 2 diabetes. We know that I think it's a third of our teenagers are obese. A third of our teenagers are clinically anxious or clinically depressed. Like, this all has its roots in food, right? And so what will happen if we can't start changing these eating habits? Unfortunately, the graph of those statistics will continue to go up until no one can ignore it, because it's got its tentacles into every bit of society. But by then, like, it's never too late, right? But I don't want to wait until then. Like, we need to turn this around now. And even when we think about mental health, particularly, like, not just depression and anxiety, but just a sense of self. I think that letting kids eat what they want and feeding them kid food, right? There are like tons of parents in America who make 2 or even 3 meals a night,
Right.
because they have lowered the bar for their kids so much that there's this idea of like kid food and adult food. To me, that teaches kids that you're helpless, you're entitled, and you're not grown up yet. And it doesn't give any sense of like hope and a growth mindset. And so I really believe that not knowing how to nourish yourself, and that eating horrid food, which can directly affect the brain and directly affect the mood, leads to a general loss of a sense of self and a loss of self-confidence. So to me, it's huge. To me, fixing our food is the foundation of almost everything that you can look at our kids' generation and say, I don't like that. That doesn't feel right. Fixing the food is the way to turn that around.
I agree with you like 100%. Having worked with kids most of my life, a lot of times, a lot of the problems I see kids have with self-esteem and self-identification and how they define themselves is a physical image. And if they're overeating or if they're overweight because of what they're eating, that has to change. I talk to people often about food and things like that, and about health and working out and things like that. And I tell them all the time, you're not going to lose weight by exercising. You're not. It's diet. It's all about what you're eating. You can exercise until your muscles are bound, but if you're eating the wrong things, you're still not going to lose the weight. I've been there myself, until you change your diet. So I agree with you 100%. I think if we're going in the wrong direction, you're right. Diabetes are on the rise. Look at our present situation with the pandemic. Many people who've gotten sick and in hospitalized because of their weight, or if they're obese or if they're way overweight. I talk to many nurses who tell me that. Tell me how cooking can help. I know that cooking is sort of like a project sometimes. It's sort of like a lab project, but tell us how it can reduce and manage stress in ourselves and our kids. Because I was very interested. I read some of the things that you wrote about that, and I thought they were, hit the nail on the head.
Well, it was funny that you led off this interview by saying, we're going to talk about cooking with kids and how it reduces stress. And I thought, I don't know if you could lead with that, because a lot of people probably said, yeah, right.
I understand, but we are going to talk about stress. That.
Yeah, no, but it does sound a little stressful to start, right? I mean, a lot of things that are well worthwhile are hard at the beginning. They're hard at the beginning. There's no bones about it. So for me, my kids right now are, 16, 13, 10, and 7. And the older 2, Paul and Leah, have been cooking 1 meal a week, off and on as our schedules change, for 3 years now.
Awesome.
So, ask any mom, would a night off a week of planning and cooking a meal reduce your stress? She would say yes. And so that's one way, right? Is that we train up helpers that help us reduce our familial stress, right? And anytime that I am like moving toward dinner and I'm so behind and I just need to get the raw vegetables cut, I have helpers that I can say, hey guys, come here. I need some help. You grab a cucumber, you grab a carrot, get out of my way, go to the table and go cut up some stuff. That is stress reducing. But again, it's because I invested the time, right? I invested the time. Now I think that cooking can be therapeutic. I interviewed a social worker once who said that when we work with our hands, so like Play-Doh, painting, and I'm like cutting up vegetables with knives, she said, yeah, sure, absolutely. It sort of opens up the storytelling parts of our brains. So if you want to hear your kids tell their stories, right, about their day, do something with your hands with them, do something creative to open up that part of your brain. And I thought that is so cool. So I like to term it therapeutic creativity, that we're doing things that are with our hands that can open up the creative parts of our brains. And then my 16-year-old Paul, he does some interviews with me sometimes too. And a lot of times people will say, well, what's your favorite part about cooking? Why do you like knowing how to cook? And here is a teenage boy who says, well, I actually like cutting up the vegetables. He'll often volunteer to do that. If we have a bunch of jobs on a list, he'll be like, well, I'll cut up vegetables to freeze or whatever. He says, because that repetitive motion is really therapeutic for me. Like, teenage boy, how cool is that, right? So for me, therapeutic creativity, that sort of cathartic motion, it connects you with your family over the stories. And then that food mood connection is also huge, right? Like I said, I believe that our nutrient less diet, whether that causes weight gain or not, I mean, it's not all about weight, right? It's about the habits we start. So if we look at a 40-year-old adult or a 50-year-old adult who's just been diagnosed with diabetes or high cholesterol or heart disease, like, that didn't start yesterday. That started a decade or 2 decades ago, or I believe with the habits that they built in childhood, right? Mm-hmm. If you build habits of drinking your sugar, of turning to sweet, sugary, high starch foods for comfort, of eating convenience foods because they're cheap, easy, and quick. If those are your habits, both in your palate and in your lifestyle, that's going to continue, right? So for me, I want to start my kids with habits of, we eat vegetables with every meal. We include healthy fats with our vegetables. We know how to cook. And so I really believe that when kids know how to cook, that completely increases their confidence, because there's nothing like authentic praise, right? We can say, I love your painting from art. Good job. We can say that all day long. They know it's fake, right? But when they're feeding someone else, like, it's very clear that this is a real authentic task. This is something adults do. And when a kid can do that, their confidence goes through the roof. And they're eating the kinds of foods that are, brain building, brain protective, building their cells, at the cellular level to be healthier adults. So for me, it's kind of like all that and a ball of wax. It's
why?
Everything.
That's so enlightening. One of the greatest compliments that you can pay somebody who is cooking for you is ask for some more. Mm-hmm. Think about that. A 16-year-old who is cooking maybe for a girlfriend in the future. I'm not saying now, but in the future. And she asks for more and says it's real good. That's really good. The other thing that's really interesting is you talk about cooking vegetables. And I was a great prep cook. I worked in the restaurant business. And so I know how to use a knife, and I can cook. I can do, in the restaurant business, it's about exacting pieces of that cucumber and carrot and stuff like that. So I know how to cook. I know how to cut with a knife. So I've taught people how to do that. It is so satisfying. It is. Maybe it's my compulsive nature but excessive compulsive. Every piece of carrot had to be exactly the same. So yeah, I think that plays into it too. And I think you're right. Those things are very good to reduce stress. And I think the most important thing you said is when you guys are cooking together, they tell their story. Mm-hmm. And they're as they're cooking, they're talking and letting you know how their day was. That is talk therapy.
Yeah.
It's simple as that. Okay, so I wanted to talk to you about something that's near and dear to my heart. Let's talk about something that's very stressful to all the parents out there. And I know, I hear you, I see you, I understand what you were going through. And that's if you have a picky eater. My daughter was a picky eater. Okay, she was a very picky eater. But, and to prove that, she ate peanut butter and honey sandwiches for lunch every day for 5 years. I'm not kidding. So, and because of that, it creates a lot of stress, not just, when you're preparing meals, because you have to be very aware of what you're making. And you said it yourself. Sometimes you make 2 meals. I'm guilty of that myself. I just wanted to eat, but you have to be very aware of what they will eat, what they not eat. And when you're picking a restaurant, which is incredibly stressful anyway, what do you want to eat? I don't know. And the stress begins. Is there anything we can do to help with the stress caused by fussy eaters?
What's funny is I speak about picky eating all the time. One of my TEDx talks is on picky eating. I've never had anyone ask, how do we help alleviate the parents' stress? Everyone wants to know how to fix the picky eater. So this was an interesting question, and probably speaks to your experience that you're really, you felt all that stress. I think what I really want parents to know is that being a picky eater is really stressful too.
Yeah.
And circular, because often stress can be a cause and an effect for the kids of picky eating. And it's also circular for the parents. The more stressed we get about, oh my gosh, my kid is not eating, they're not going to be nourished, I don't know how to pick a restaurant. The more our interactions with them around food are stressful, the more they're stressed, the more they behave like a picky eater. So removing the stress from the situation top to bottom, parent and child, is vital. It's vital. And so one of the recommendations that I give to families is to begin the meal with a bit of a routine, to think about how to enter into eating with less stress in our bodies, to get into that parasympathetic state. So we might think about taking some 5 in, 5 out breaths, or better yet, a 2x breath, right? A 3 in, a 6 out breath as a family before eating. We might want to think about beginning the meal with gratitude, whether that's grace or whether that's just sharing gratitude, with or without faith, doesn't matter. But starting with that gratitude, right? That's opening up the higher level parts of our brain and settling us into the parasympathetic state so that we can actually digest the food, at least whatever food that darn picky eater is eating it. We want him to digest it, right? And then for parents, for me, what's really important for parents to understand is that the parent of the picky eater needs to accept the fact that there are some boundaries that, when crossed, greatly increase the stress on both sides. Okay. And the boundaries with eating is that we really cannot force our kids to eat. We try, we say, you have to eat 3 bites and then you can leave. Or old school, you have to clear your plate and then you can leave the table, right? Or you have to eat 3 bites, or if you eat 3 bites, I'll give you dessert. Okay. Right. All of that pressure is a lose-lose situation, because honestly, if they just say no, we can't win. And good disciplinarian parents know that you really shouldn't say something you can't follow through on. But we do it all the time with eating. Right. Because we're so stressed that our kid is a picky eater and not eating, that we're stuck in lizard brain. Right? We're not accessing our academic, our upper level thinking. And so this is not mine. This is from a person called Ellen Satter, created the division of responsibility. And it says, when eating, the parent is in charge of what is served, when we eat, and where we eat. And that is the end. So if parents can internalize that and accept it, it's a huge weight off the shoulders and a massive stress reduction. The child is responsible for if they eat and how much they eat. So that means all of those power struggles about how many bites do I have to eat? Do I have to eat this? Do I have to eat that? They're gone, because the child doesn't have to eat anything. And so for a parent to say, here's the meal where we have some chicken, we have some green beans, and we have some rice. Do I have to eat it? You don't have to eat it. Those words, you don't have to eat it, over time. Like at first the kid won't believe you, right? If that's been kind of part of the habit, that there's some sort of pressure to eat. But over time, those words, you don't have to eat this. You may taste it. I'd like you to put a bite on your plate, right? We can be in charge of that. We can say that this bite has to go on your plate, but no, you don't have to eat it. And so that greatly reduces the stress in the kids. When the power struggles begin to dissipate, the stress dissipates in the parents. And that's one of the first steps in reforming the picky eater, which is really going to start, continue to reduce that stress. So I think starting and ending with the stress is really important, because stressed out kids can't eat well.
And stressed out parents are not a good thing either. The problem is okay. So we stopped doing special meals. We stopped being the restaurant for our kid and say, hey, guess what's on the menu tonight? It's in front of you. You're not ordering off a menu. The problem is later on when they are hungry, what they start reaching for. And you have to sort of put a guideline there as well. And I don't know how this happens. And you can talk to this better than I can, because as a young child, my daughter ate everything.
Yeah.
And how do you learn to be a picky eater? I myself, it's funny because I've had this conversation with both my daughter and my wife. I was not a picky eater. I ate everything. And so somehow I don't get it. I can always find something to eat. And I would say that all the time. I don't care where we go. I give them money. They feed me. I'm happy. That's it. It's, I'll eat whatever they have. So I don't always get it. How do you know you don't like that? At least you said to try a piece, right?
It's funny. Sometimes parents feel a lot of guilt. They think, did I do this? Did I create this picky eater? And what the studies show, though, what most research shows, is that nothing parents do, no single factor that has been studied in parental discipline actually increases picky eating. The only factor that made a difference, I got to get this right, I think it was just seeing the parent eat things can help decrease picky eating. But there's nothing that parents did that actually caused picky eating. So most picky eating has a psychological or physiological root cause in the child. And so a lot of our kids, we've got these pouches now, we've got all sorts of different ways that we're trying to feed our toddlers. Some of them actually interrupt the eating process and can cause kids to have trouble knowing how to swallow or knowing how to chew well. And so, again, there's nothing that the parents do, or it can just be the shape of the mouth, or if they're a mouth breather at night and they end up with a high palate. We've got a lot of kids. I mean, I know what a highly sensitive person is, which can come with some sensory processing difficulties, and any sort of sensory overload, even something like sight or sound, can impact the child's relationship with food. And so if they've got any sensory issues, which I think are really increasing, I think that statistically it's like 15% of kids have some sensory difficulties. I think it's more. I think for whatever reason, when we look at, we have tagless shirts, we have seamless socks, we have unscented things. We were at a trampoline park last week, and they actually have a whole section of time once a week for sensory kids at the trampoline park, where they turn down the music and they reduce the flashing lights. And I'm like, okay, that's new.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I guarantee that there are more what I call sensory kids, than there were even 10 and 20, 30 years ago. And so again, if your senses are getting in the way of your good relationship with food, you're going to look like a picky eater. But it's not about the food, it's about how you're processing your senses. So there's a ton of physiological root causes that probably we just aren't seeing, we're not innately understanding as parents. And then, when the child shows a little bit of picky eating tendency, or you get a little stressed about food, or they're just, it's super developmental between about the ages of 2 and 5 to push the boundaries. That's their job, is to figure out where their parents' control ends and where their control begins. So they're going to push the boundaries everywhere they can. And in a world of convenience food, where it's really easy to just throw in some nuggets and fries, right? And we're sort of in a generation of parents too, who are maybe a little more being friends with their kids. They want to avoid the anger and the power struggles, and they don't want to be too tough and too disciplinarian. The kids who are pushing those boundaries, they're finding that they're winning, right? And maybe they're getting this short order and getting the same food all the time, and then their palate just hasn't expanded. So there are a lot of, I think, root causes to picky eating, and parents don't cause it. But I do think sometimes the parental relationship can exacerbate the little seed that's already happening. Because it's just too easy for us to do. But what I love, I work with a lot of parents who have picky eaters. We've had thousands of families go through our picky eating challenge, and just implementing a few steps, one of which being that division of responsibility, just letting go of the idea that we need to pressure them to eat. Parents tell me all the time, I can't even believe this, Katie. I have an extremely picky eater. If I don't make him eat the cucumbers, I'm freaking out that he won't eat anything. And today I just decided to try it, right? This one mom, she's like, I just decided to try it. And he said, do I have to eat the cucumbers? And I said, no, you don't, but you can serve yourself as many as you want. And even this extremely picky eater ate exactly the same number of cucumbers she would have given him. I don't know if it was like 2 or something, but there was no power struggle. She said, I love this. I feel so much less stressed. And she could see it in her child's face that he feels less stressed. So it's simple steps, but it's not always easy, right? What's simple is not always easy, but what's hard is often worth it.
You're right. I mean, it is not always easy to do this. And especially like you mentioned, sometimes it's a generational thing. I learned how to cook. It was just part of my generation. Parents who are young today, 20s, 30s, may not know how to cook as much as, say, I did. And for parents who don't know how to cook or even don't like to cook, are there some easy steps or easy things they can do that they can take to help at least get themselves on the right road?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, we got to be motivated to do it, right? So hopefully what we talked about so far, right? How much our kids need to be nourished, the connection between food and our mood. I mean, if you told a parent your child might sleep better, might behave better, might learn better in school, right? Is going to grow better. You're going to set them up for better health as adults. Most parents would be like, well, yeah, of course I want that. Okay, shop in the produce section. Oh, that's hard, right? It can be really hard to change and to learn new skills. So we have to start with motivation, right? I don't know if you've read the book Stages of Change, but like our brain has to be in the right place and motivated enough and have kind of thought about the changes enough. So I advocate for baby steps. Maybe you just try one new vegetable or one new preparation of a vegetable in a day or in a given week even. Maybe a baby step is just a meal plan because planning makes progress. If you don't meal plan, the chances of you sliding back into convenience food increase exponentially. So sometimes just, grabbing a scrap envelope out of the recycle bin and writing down some ideas of food you can make, like that's huge progress. And then getting the kids involved. I have tons of parents tell me, I don't really know how to cook, but I'm going to try your classes and I'll just learn along with them. And what a beautiful thing for the kids to see that humility in the parent.
I think you're right. I think one of the first steps they can do to alleviate that stress, if you're not somebody who likes to cook, and is to take that e-course that you invented or wrote, and it's a great way. I mean, and the motivation is you're going to be healthier. You're going to be doing stuff together, even if you start with one dish and then add to it. I looked on your site and I was looking at the recipes and I'm going, oh my God, that one and that one. There's a whole lot of things you can do. And by the way, folks, if that's not enough motivation for you, it's cheaper. Yeah. It's cheaper to make your own food than going out to eat all the time. I promise. I know. Feeding teenagers is a financial burden within itself. You have to take out a second mortgage. So if you can find some ways to alleviate that cost, that's going to bring down some stress as well. And it's also fun. It really is. And you know what? You may not even realize how much it's fun until you see Katie's course and read some of the articles she's written and things like that. And on that, lastly, because I don't want to run too long, but this subject is a lot more important. And people may be asking themselves, okay, why is this show about stress talking about cooking and eating and nutrition? Because it becomes such an important issue in our lives. I know people that's the number one stressor in their lives is cooking and eating and how to feed their kids, especially, and all of that. So that's why we're talking about that. But I wanted to ask you where listeners can go to get more information about the food issues we're talking about and also about what you do.
Sure. Yeah. We are at kidscookrealfood.com. And I know we have set up a page at kidscookrealfood.com/finding contentment. And so that's actually my TEDx talk on critical thinking and getting
Good
kids
title.
to use their curiosity in the kitchen. But we always have something free. We always have something to get you engaged and get you involved. And I mean, I think just we worry about our kids so much. Parents do, and grandparents do. We worry about their health. We worry about their confidence. We know that kids are really struggling in this pandemic with connecting with others and kind of taking on the stress through mirror neurons of their parents and how we're feeling. And so to be able to give a child something that they can do to serve others, to be active, to, make a difference in the world. I think of an after school program in Maine with high school kids who used our course. And the teacher told me when they started, the kids were terrified. High school kids were terrified of using a knife because none of them knew how to do it. And so they worked through our course. And then at the end, they actually had an event where they served their principal and their school board a 3-course meal. And she said it was absolute chaos. There were people coming in from wrestling practice and going out to cheerleading and tag teaming, but they made apple crisp, they made homemade dressing, they chopped up a salad. And I think any parent can imagine how it would feel to see that teenager walking through your door and say, hey, how was your day? What'd you do today? And what's the look on their face when they tell that story, right? Of making a meal for their principal and their school board. To me, that's making state champions in volleyball, but without it quite as much work, without quite as much driving back and forth to practices, right? That confidence cannot be understated.
And I agree. At the last school I worked in, that had a culinary department, and the kids made Thanksgiving dinner for all the staff, and the principal and the superintendent came, and a lot of school board members came. It was awesome. The kids dressed up. They were servers. They had such a great time doing it. And I really want to stress that everyone should take a look at your course. And if you don't want to take it yourself, parents, take it with your kid.
Yeah.
Do it as a team and alleviate some of the stress that's involved around eating right and cooking together.
And we start way down at age 2, which is when kids are still intrinsically motivated, right, to cook and to do things and hope to curb some of those picky eating tendencies between 2 and 5. Because when kids are involved, they want to eat it.
Right. Well, Katie, thank you. I know that you're so busy doing so many things, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, because it is such an important topic. We cannot cover all the things that you can learn and you could do with cooking and food. It's so helpful to alleviate stress if used in the right way. And if you find yourself being stressed out about food and about cooking, again, learn more about the power of teaching kids to cook. Look up Katie Kimball on YouTube. She's got 1 million videos. They're really cool. I've watched a few myself. And check out, what do you have, 2,000-3,000 books on Amazon?
2 or 3.
and so do a search for Katie Kimball on Amazon. I have to admit that my favorite is the Smart Sweets, the 30 desserts to indulge your sweet tooth book. I'm sorry I got stuck on that one, but it was really good. And I suggest everyone else do that. Katie, thank you so much for joining us today. I appreciate it.
It's my pleasure.
Well, that's going to do it for today. This has been your host, Will Heckman. I want to thank you all for joining us. Again, don't forget to please follow this podcast either on YouTube or on your favorite podcast listening station. Send in the reviews. Hit the subscribe button. If you're watching the podcast on YouTube, hit the like button. And remember, also, go to stress.org. Find out a lot about the American Institute of Stress. There's a lot of information there. And just as stress is different for everyone, no one stress reduction management strategy is right for everyone. So please join us next time, because we're going to explore more stress management strategies and insights. And remember, again, visit stress.org, and there you will find a whole lot of tools and techniques to help you to live a healthier, happier, and hopefully a longer life. And I hope the information that you heard today from Katie and myself will help you find contentment. Good day, everyone.